Thank you. Gopalan sir, you can unmute now. Gopalan sir is chartered accountant. While working in industry, it was his fortune to come in contact with J. Krishnamurti and his talks in 1980. He and Sobhaji joined the Valley School as parents in 1982 and as teachers in 1983. Gopalan sir is now 70 plus and resides in campus, but to blossom in 1929. Creativity deals with creativity, 1 to 1 plus infinity or eternity in 2020, exploring intelligence, operating thought, and third book is Inside, obscured by intellect, living, learning, education. Gopalan sir, now you can.
So, good morning, all. Namaste to you. I think there are too many expectations just reading the topic of the day, but that topic is not an original phrase of mine. Krishnamurti's public talks from 1933 until 1986 invariably followed an exploration of the crisis before humanity, the process of thought, limitation of knowledge, and its incapability to comprehend something vaster than itself, the computer and what it held for man, fear, sorrow, and the causes for their arising, understanding fear and its consequent ending, death, meditation, all these over a series of 4, 5, 6 talks. But occasionally, Krishnamurti made a statement which was completely at variance with this pattern. Sometimes these statements seemed contradictory to his usual approach. Sometimes they seemed to be aphorisms. At other times, they seemed to be articulation of insights. But very rarely were these statements explored in great detail by Krishnamurti himself or in subsequent discussions by people who have listened to them. So, in this meeting, I would like to share this statement that Krishnamurti made in 1973 at Sanen, which is seemingly contradictory to his usual exploration. The statement was made only once at the public talk in Sanen and repeated in a question and answer session at Sanen a few days later. I have not seen this statement made previously anywhere else, nor have I heard it in a later talk. So let me first read that statement, which I found interesting. This is at talk 5 in Sanen on 24th July 1973. Quoting from the talk, intelligence is not the intellectual acceptance of an idea. It is not the product of reason, logic, though reason and logic must exist. But it is not the result of that. It is the perception of truth from which arises wisdom. Wisdom is the daughter of truth, and intelligence is the daughter of wisdom. End of quote. So this is this very intriguing sentence, which I have been trying to unpack for myself. And I said, let me share my thoughts on this with this group. In most discussions of Krishnamurti's talks, truth, wisdom, and intelligence are treated more or less as synonymous terms for a quality that is beyond thought. These qualities are unapproachable by thought, which is anchored to memory and its resultant conditioning. It is only when thought subsides that these qualities become perceptible. Knowledge is always of the past, and however vast it may be, it cannot encompass truth, wisdom, and intelligence. This is how we have normally approached uh, this topic. So, what then is the implication of this statement that wisdom is the daughter of truth and intelligence is the daughter of wisdom? In order to explore this, let me quickly recapitulate the process of perception and the rising of thought. We've discussed this in previous meetings as well. Contact with the world results in sensations rising in the sense organs, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin. The sensations are transduced and sent as electric impulses to the brain. Perception happens in the brain. The response of the brain perceiving the sensations is felt immediately in the body. It is felt as muscle contraction and relaxation, a feeling of warmth or cold, a racing or a relaxed heartbeat. Thought arises thereafter and records the impression in memory, analyzes, explains, passes judgment. Therefore, perception is not of thought. Perception happens in the brain. What is it in the brain that perceives? It has to be that energy which we call life itself. So, is not all perception, including the perception of every sensation, by life energy alone? Then the next question arises, is there a difference between information and knowledge? Again, in day-to-day language, we use these two words interchangeably. But are they really interchangeable? If I can give an example from the atomic science that I studied decades ago, atoms are composed of protons and electrons. The electrons and the protons are generic. There is no identifiable difference between them. But when they combine in specific patterns, the result is unique compounds like oxygen or nitrogen. The same pattern always gives the same unique compound. And this pattern is also stored in knowledge. So it is the pattern that makes data or information into knowledge, is it not? Discovery results in the pattern being seen for the first time, and then this pattern becomes part of the knowledge bank. So how does this connect up with wisdom? I found a very pithy quote on the net the other day about wisdom, which I see has a lot of meaning. And that quote is, knowledge is knowing that tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. Now, the common meaning of wisdom for us usually is accumulated knowledge. But then we must ask, do encyclopedias have wisdom? Because they have accumulated knowledge. Computers must have even greater wisdom by that standard. Obviously not. There is something more. Wisdom implies a living entity that uses information and knowledge. It is this life energy in the entity that uses thought intellect to identify these patterns. And it is the life energy that uses the knowledge of previously discovered patterns and so does not have to rediscover that pattern every time. Now, knowledge that wisdom uses is always of the past, but every time it is used, it is a new event, unconnected to previous events. It is thought intellect alone that strings the events together, gives it a continuity, and then labels it as repetition. So, does wisdom and intelligence then straddle both life energy as well as knowledge? Do they act as a bridge? Because life energy has to be present, life energy has to use the accumulated knowledge. So, is life energy using accumulated knowledge and information? Is this wisdom and intelligence? I'm asking. Now, intellectual capability is the ability to analyze, manipulate, dominate. These must result in conflict. And man, we know, has always been in conflict. So, is wisdom related to intellectual capability? Man assumes that wisdom is proportionate to intellectual capability. But is it? Now, does the intellect have the capability and the requirements to understand what is coexistence? Because only in coexistence is there an end to conflict. In present day man, is present day man wiser than his predecessors? Has man learned the futility of war, division, tribal identification after all his history on earth? If he has not, obviously man has not learned from the experience of the past. So is that wisdom? Now, that also raises a question, do animals and other living beings have access to wisdom? Are they not way ahead of man in learning to coexist together? There seems to be an enormous gap between man and animals in this ability to coexist. There are also numerous examples of animals having psychic ability. These psychic abilities can be observed in pets, in cows, in horses. In fact, in hospice care, dogs are brought in for nursing and palliative care. There is something they are able to communicate to that person who is in a terminal state. Animals also reveal their wisdom when they are ill and they go off their food. The dogs and cats can be observed eating selected grass and leaves, and no animal ever overeats. Even if there's a plate full of food, when it's had enough, it simply walks away. It's very rare to see a human being do that. Now, human knowledge is vast, and through taxonomy, every leaf and plant has been classified and arranged. But all this knowledge cannot help man identify which leaf is edible and is therefore food and which is poisonous. But every animal can do this and survive in nature, not man. But I think the greatest example of animal wisdom in operation is to watch them when they give birth and when they die. You don't hear of animals having to be rushed to a hospital for a delivery. They do it quietly and very rarely with problems. And it's very rare to see an animal actually die. They seem to sense when those last moments are coming. They withdraw into a bush somewhere very quietly and go with silence. It is humans who seem to need this whole hospital setup and the all the intubation and the respirator and the ventilator and whatnot, attempting to prolong that final departure if it's possible to prolong. Is that wisdom? Now, we also have talked a lot about evolution as a gradual development. We know that life began as a single cell that eventually evolved to a human form with trillions of cells. And in all taxonomic classifications, man is shown at the top of this pyramid. in this process of evolution. But what is it in the human being that evolved? The energy in the human being cannot evolve, it's always energy. The single cell that eventually evolved to the human form of trillions of cells happened because of cell multiplication. Therefore, whatever is in man in his trillions of cells was there in the initial original cell. Nothing new has been added. So this evolution has only been a different form of manifestation. It has not been adding anything new. So is it right to say that evolution of the body has only been an adaptation to external environment? So certain kinds of creatures, the hands became the wings. And can we say that future humans will be 95% brain and only 5% body, because that's the only thing they seem to be required to use in today's world? And the third part of the human being, the psyche, can it evolve at all? Psyche being only memory and imagination, what evolution is possible in memory and imagination? Therefore, evolution applies only to the physical body, and I am suggesting it is only an adaptation to the environment outside. There is no pyramid with a higher scale and man sitting at top on the top of that pyramid. Now, insights of and wisdom from the seers of law is available to us as knowledge. And such codified knowledge is what is called the scriptures. Are these not signposts, pointers of the way that these seers saw something? Just pointers. Is it intelligent to study these scriptures and other records of such insight and wisdom? Clearly, yes, to understand the journey that they took it through, that they went through, and nothing more. Now, Krishnamurti in his talks repeatedly and emphatically asserted that no book is sacred. Does his assertion make meaning to us because it is logically so? Or does it make meaning to us but because we actually feel the same? So because then the question always arises, why do we read or listen to Krishnamurti? Is it that both are possible? We see his observations as pointers, and therefore we want to read or listen to them. His insights and wisdom also have the authority of a seer because we see him as a seer. I would like here to bring in the simile of a rocket which goes into space. The energy that it needs to beat the gravitational field is so enormous that the rocket has multi-stages. Each stage of that rocket takes the rocket up to a certain altitude. Then its work is over and it drops away. It's not carried any further. Is that how knowledge and wisdom is meant to be used? Use it as a booster to the point you can take it, then drop it. It's not required anymore. It doesn't have to be carried on after that. It becomes a burden. This inevitably raises the question, which again we have discussed earlier, where is memory stored? We've always assumed that it is stored in the brain. But it's interesting to put together what current science, when I say current, I mean about 15 to 20 years old, is talking about. Physics brought in the idea of quantum sometime in the 20th century. Biology and chemistry followed 100 years later. And they're all coming to this point now where, in a sense, as I understand it, they are saying that this old idea that there is a lot of empty space in the atom is not really true. This space is made up of subatomic particles, and these particles behave as particles of matter. They also behave as waves of energy, and they are able to exist like that at a dimension which they call now the 0 point field. And they are talking now of a quantum form where such particles and waves are virtually rising and dissipating continuously. And now they are saying all knowledge, all memory is, is reposited in this 0 point field. And the human brain is simply something that is accessing this field. This is a whole series of books on this. If one can explore it if one is interested. Does this not, in a sense, reconfirm the same statement that has been discussed earlier, that there is no individual memory, all memory is a collective memory? And does that not lead to the next statement that actually there is no discovery of any new knowledge? We only rediscover knowledge which is already part of this repository of knowledge of the universe. And therefore, connecting up truth, wisdom, and intelligence, again, if I may use a simile, if you had a printed balloon and you blew that balloon, in the beginning, you see a certain pattern. And as the balloon is blown up, the pattern expands. And if you have been lucky enough to see a balloon with a world map printed on it, this becomes eminently clear as you blow up the balloon. So as the balloon becomes bigger and bigger, the map becomes clearer and clearer. But everything that you see in that expanded balloon was there in the original state. It was just not clear enough. The resolution increased. That's all. So, and this is the point I would like to get at, which I really would like us to discuss. So in this moment, when both when knowledge, both information and the stored pattern is in use, that is when life energy is in action and it is observable. Life energy or truth cannot be observed by itself. It can only be observed in its actions through wisdom and intelligence. And therefore, I would like to end with my final simile. You all know the combination lock. When you look at a combination lock, any number of possibilities exist to open that lock. But when that lock is in the open position, the combination is there in front of you and access is there right through that lock. Therefore, in the present moment, when life is acting, is truth, wisdom, and intelligence. So it's all in the moment, and that's all that is required, to just be in the moment and observe. Thank you.
Anyone can raise the hand and contribute. Please raise the hand and then contribute. Yeah. Please unmute and say. Arsad Parekh sir, please unmute and say.
Okay. Okay. Are you able to hear?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Gopalan sir. When you talked about animal and the evolution and human beings, it reminded me of my morning walk in Valley School near the Assembly Hall, Mahasagar. And I used to walk very quietly there. And there used to be some dogs sitting there very quietly, and they were at peace. But when some other dogs passed by outside the boundary of the campus, these dogs, which were sitting quietly, they started barking. And there was no possibility for the dogs outside to come inside the campus. But still, these dogs were barking. And so I asked a question, why these dogs are barking and they are losing so much energy? Why don't they feel that it is useless to bark? Because this repeats every morning the same thing. So that is probably the difference between animals and human beings, that human beings have the ability to ask question when we are losing energy due to some conflict of fear or anger. There is a possibility to look inward and see clearly and to be free from these problems. So in that way, human beings are more evolved, at least not all human beings, but human beings have the capacity to rise above human beings themselves, and or human beings also have the ability to go below the animals, becoming very, very destructive. So both possibility exist in human beings. And about the metaphor which are given about the knowledge and freedom is that Buddha had given this metaphor that if you want to cross a river, you take a boat and you go to the other end. And after reaching the other end, you don't carry the boat with you. So all these teachings of Krishnamurti or Buddha, they are like that boat. And if we use that teachings properly, we there is a possibility to be free from all the problems which are bothering us, the psychological problem. And then we don't need to carry the burden of these teachings or knowledge. So that is what I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Parik sir. Harsh Tanka sir, please unmute and say.
Okay, thank you, Gopalanji. Very interesting quotation you found, because in later years, Krishnamurti did not talk very much about wisdom. It's not a word that he used, but in earlier years, I think he did talk about wisdom. And I think it's, if you want to explore the relationship between wisdom and intelligence and all of these things, then will you excuse me a moment? देखो अंजिता अंजिता इसको चुप रखो. Sorry, I just wanted, the kid was disturbing my thought process, and I had to ask his parents to look after him. So, Krishnaji, wisdom and intelligence, I mean, that's really what we are unpacking right now. And I think in the same talk that Gopalanji referred to, this is what Krishnaji says. He says, firstly, that when no energy is wasted, then the mind can be with, and not wasted in thought, he means, the mind can be with what is. And when the mind is with what is and observing what is, that observation brings about the ability to see, and this is what he says, not only the truth, but the wisdom of this. So what does he mean? Not only the truth, but the wisdom of it. And I think in other places he explains a little bit more about wisdom. But to get to it, I will just quote something from which he said about the school, Brockwood Park School, where I taught. he said that Brockwood Park is a place of learning. It's a place of learning the art of living, of exploring, and for the awakening of that intelligence that comes with compassion and love. So this is the intelligence that he's talking about, is the intelligence that comes with compassion and love. And in other places, it's clear that when he's talking about wisdom, he's talking about a moral dimension, if I can call it, as well. And so this is what he says, you're seeing not only the truth, not only what is, but you are also seeing a moral dimension, which comes with compassion and love. That will guide you in what is right action, what it is to be good, and all those things. So this is one step away from observation of the truth, is the observation of this moral dimension. And out of that moral dimension comes the intelligence that acts. The thing, what acts is intelligence. It's not the action of wisdom. It's intelligence from moment to moment, if we are in that, if intelligence can act. And I think as he continues in this quotation that you had, that if you're not operating with intelligence, it'll create confusion. And if you are creating confusion, then if intelligence comes back into operation, it will correct it immediately. So intelligence is all the time in operation. So this is what I understand, that when we are talking about wisdom, we are talking not just about what is and the fact of what is, but we're also talking about some perception of what is good, what is right, what is valuable for the whole, not just for the part. So, and that is how that wisdom then helps intelligence to operate. Intelligence is that action from moment to moment. That is, as things change, it changes, response to whatever is happening. And so, yes, we need to have awakened intelligence if we are to avoid confusion. Now, I looked up the meaning of the word wisdom in the dictionary. And it's interesting that it says the accumulation of experience. But Krishna is very clear when he's talking about wisdom, that wisdom is not experience. And as Gopalanji pointed out, we can have an enormous amount of experience, but that doesn't make us necessarily wise. Nor is wisdom something that is acquired bit by bit, that you acquire it piecemeal, a little bit, you get a little wiser every day, every experience, maybe you get a little wiser. I know some people think like that, but at least what Krishnamurti is suggesting, that the kind of wisdom he's talking about is not accumulative, it's not born of experience, it's born of perception. It's born of that perception that is allied with, and he mentions compassion and love. So that is wisdom. Wisdom, if I can turn it into an equation, wisdom equals observation plus compassion plus love. And this gives rise to intelligence. So I'm being lighthearted about it, but I think you understand what I'm saying. So I think the dictionary definition definitely says that not only is it the acquisition of knowledge, but also the developing of judgment, the ability to judge what is right, what is wrong. That is the essential part of wisdom. That you can see. A wise person just doesn't, it's not that he only has experience, it's that they can tell what is the right thing to do, what is the good thing, what is of value, and all of that. It's good judgment. So this quality of judgment is essential to wisdom. So I think that is what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Tankaji. May I request Gopalan sir to comment on these two comments? Gopalan sir, would you please?
Yeah. No, see what Dr. Parikh pointed out about animals. I was only bringing animals to point out that humans are not always, they don't always act more wise, in a more wise manner than animals. And it is especially in the challenging demands that they show their wisdom. Yes, they may bark at a visitor who is not likely to cause any problem for them. But again and again, it's a very humble experience to watch how an animal withdraws into the bushes when it knows its end is coming. It seems to sense it. And that's why it goes off its food. It withdraws very quietly without any fuss. It just passes away. And these 1.5 years, we have been watching the kind of horrendous trauma that humans have invented for themselves. And you know, the pictures are all there, running for oxygen, this and that. The end has to come at some point. With all our experience, we have not learned to meet that with the simplicity that it requires. Are we waiting for somebody to teach us this? It has to be a learning. It can't be a teaching. So what has prevented human beings from learning this? When this evidence is there in front of us, it's not that humans haven't seen this. Therefore, what Harsh is talking about, that quality of judgment, it's so evident in front of us that all conflict comes because of the separation of me from the world. Has it resulted in the me dissolving or the me not getting encouraged? Hasn't. We seem to be where we are. That's why we say there's no psychological evolution. There, man has not even progressed in his qualities, his social qualities, his qualities of responsibility over the time that he has been in existence. Has he learned anything? Is the question that always comes when you look at it. But again, I think asking whether man has learned is an escape. I can only ask, can I observe that movement of division in myself? That's all I can do. In that moment, I sense that, I see it, and I move on. But can I be aware of that kind of a division in myself? Because as I am, so is the world. The world is not going to be different from what I am.
Thank you, sir. May I request Dinesh Wagmare and then Durga Rani. Dinesh Wagmare, please.
Gopalan sir and Harshankar sir. Actually, I just want to explore. Can we say that the information about the things are the details available to us? And knowledge is basically collecting the details which are required for us. And out of that knowledge, wisdom is what is the significance of it to me, or how I am related to it, and what action you have to take in the moment is the insight. What I want to do with that truth of the thing in the moment. So right word instead of that intelligence is insight, because insight word has also been used by Krishnamurti at various places. And intelligence is actually beyond, it is with truth. It is beyond wisdom. What do you have to say on all this? Am I clear, sir?
Gopalan sir, please. Gopalan sir first and then Tanka.
Yeah, I understand what you are saying, but you know, in today's world, the big area of business is big data. And that big data actually is analysis of very small data, right? Every time I go on to Amazon and I buy something, there's a machine there keeping a track of what I'm buying, what I browsed for last time. All this is information. But there's a little program there that is giving some analysis to that information and revealing a pattern that I look for these things. And then it tries to build on that. So this separation of data and knowledge, I think it requires that quality of insight that it's ultimately, it's only from there that you can do it. It's not self-revealing.
So that insight is wisdom.
I'm saying the insight, where does it come from? Insight is not one separate energy sitting somewhere. It's all part of that one life energy manifesting itself in different aspects. But in that moment of insight, in that moment, the entire universe is open to us at that moment, is it not? So these things unlock the doors for us to look through, like the lens of a SLR camera. The moment you press that button, for that fraction of a second, it opens and everything is visible. And it shuts immediately afterwards before you even realize it's shut. So that is why the present moment and being in it is all that matters. All this discussion only helps you to understand that.
Now, as Harsh said, what is the action in this? What role action has in this?
Action of whom? If I'm,
Of course, it will be through you only, through yourself only.
Right. So if in this action I can see the motive that caused me to get into it, that itself is a revelation. It is only in that I will get that revelation, is it not? What is it that makes me even want to do this will come only when I'm actually doing it. Otherwise, it is just academic discussion.
Thank
that
you,
is
sir.
intelligence. That is intelligence.
Thank you, Wagmar. Thank you, Wagmar. Let Harsh Tankha sir comment on it, please.
Well, I sort of
Tankha sir.
sympathize with Wagmaraji that I was also surprised when I saw this, that wisdom, intelligence is the daughter of wisdom, because my sense was also that wisdom comes after intelligence, that it's intelligence that allows us to see what is, and through our perception, through intelligence, which is not distorted by thought, through that perception, wisdom may come. But it's very clear that Krishnji puts it the other way around. And he says, and out of that wisdom, I'm quoting him, out of that wisdom comes intelligence, which is what Gopalanji quoted. Out of that wisdom comes intelligence, which will operate in daily life. So I started to ask myself, what exactly does he mean? And then I told you what I think he means. And the other thing you mentioned also was insight and intelligence. And you said you wanted to use the word insight, but instead of intelligence. But I think that even as we use the word insight, there is a kind of sense of insight that we have an insight. The insight comes, it's an insight into the nature of things. It's something, some moment we have an insight, right? But actually in this very same quotation, in this very, just the next sentence, Krishna says about intelligence, that intelligence is all the time in operation. That is not something that you suddenly have an insight or you suddenly get a thing. Intelligence is all the time in our operation, and when we are not able, because our mind is clouded by thought, we are not able to act, to be with that intelligence, then confusion happens. But intelligence has this quality of ever present, moment to moment, which can act. Insight has maybe very similar. Insight may be a moment of intelligence, or maybe a moment of perception of the whole, or perception of how everything connects together and all is. But it's just a question of words, but they're very similar in that we are talking about something that goes beyond the self and something that is capable of perceiving the whole and not a part. And insight is like that, and so is intelligence.
Thank you.
Gopalan sir, Shakti ji wanted to know, what do you mean by wisdom? What do you mean by intelligence? Everybody has got a different meaning for that. So in what sense you used it? What sense Sir is using it? Please tell.
I think Harsh explained it in fairly great detail, but
Yeah,
essentially, but the way I looked at it, I only put the way I looked
yes.
at it, I said there is information available all along, and they are all pieces of information. When you see a pattern in that piece of information, that is knowledge, right? So knowledge is seeing the pattern. Now, wisdom is a little more. In seeing all the pattern, what is that insight that you have? Wisdom, insight, they all go together. And this energy which is operating to me is intelligence. But it's all one energy. It's that energy of life. I mean, when it's seen here, we call it intelligence. When it is seen there, we say wisdom. When we see it somewhere, in a moment, we say insight. But it's one energy. There aren't multiple energies. So whichever way life acts, in awareness, there is the understanding of what that life is revealing to you. You call it intelligence, you call it wisdom, you call it insight. The words to me don't matter much.
Shakti ji, would you please unmute and say what you understand by this? Shakti ji, please unmute and say.
Hello. Yes, my voice is reaching, sir.
Yeah, very, very well reaching. No problem.
Yeah. I just wanted to say that because in the text, in this excerpt of Krishnamurti, I am unable to understand that what does the word wisdom denote here, and what does the word intelligence denote here at this in this excerpt. This is perhaps I am not getting it. Just that I wanted to share. Thank you.
Yeah, this is what I said in the beginning. This particular sentence, Krishnamurti used only once in 1973 at a Sanan talk, and he repeated it a few days later in a question answer section. I have not heard it opened out by him in any other talk, earlier or later. So this has been left to the listener to figure out for himself. We can talk about it endlessly, but we have to figure out. And I think whatever perception we get from it, we move from there. There's no authoritative explanation of this going to come from anybody.
Well, if I may say, in 1949, first public talk Madras, he talks a lot about wisdom in that talk. And in that talk, he says two things. One is that wisdom is not experience. He says wisdom has no experiencer. Wisdom is as love is. And without that love, we can't pursue wisdom. Wisdom is ever fresh, ever new. How can you know the new if there's continuity? Truth is wisdom. So I'm just saying various things from that talk about wisdom. So he does actually, there are other talks too, where he talks about wisdom. You may wonder what's going on here. I worked on the collection on when I was at Brockwood. I worked on the collected works of Krishnamurti. I happen to have pretty much the entire text of all his talks on my computer. So it's relatively easy for me, relatively easy to find what he said about anything, right? So
No,
also
but
he said,
what I was is intrigued by in this statement is the statement that wisdom is the daughter of truth and intelligence is the daughter of wisdom. What does it mean to be a daughter? Right? That's the intriguing part.
I would suggest that what he's saying is that the perception of what is comes first. If you don't have the perception of what is, then wisdom follows, adding the moral dimension, if I can call it that. You know, the element of justice. But it's all in one moment. It's like in time. That's the impression I have. That's the relationship. You have to start by perceiving what is. When you perceive what is, you also perceive what is the right thing to do, what is good, what is of value, what is not, which guides your action. And I think the way he uses intelligence is he generally says that intelligence acts. You want intelligence to act. So wisdom is not directly linked. He's so after, along with the wisdom comes then the action, that part is intelligence. So there is a kind of relationship between them, not in time, not one after the other. They may all happen simultaneously, but that's why he uses, I think this is my understanding, he uses the word daughter, that one comes from the other. There's a perception. In that perception of what is, you also perceive what is good, what is not. And then from that perception of what is good and what is not, the right action in that moment comes through, that is intelligence. So this is my understanding. Now, having understood this, I mean, you know, it's in a way it's all words, but it's, I think, a challenge to us to explore this in our own self, to explore in our own self-inquiry. You know, we begin to see if this is true. I mean, I don't like taking what he says, just saying what he says, but I don't like taking what he says as possible. So I would suggest that this is an invitation for us to examine, not to quibble about the meaning of words and which one we should use, but to examine in ourselves. What is that process? What is happening? What, at the moment, can we get when thought is no longer action? What happens when thought is no longer an action? Because this is in a way talking about when thought is no longer an action. And we need to observe that ourselves.
Thank you, Tanika sir. Let us move on. Durga Rani, please. And
Yeah. Hello. Good morning, everybody. I hope I'm audible, I think. Yeah.
yeah.
Good morning, sir. Yeah. I think it's this discussion is interestingly, you know, it's becoming more and more interesting. Yeah. So Gopalan sir, you have brought out a lot of descriptions of the physical world, and you also stated what you found in Krishnamurti teaching, and you also, you know, enumerated the points which occurred to you and which, according to you, is the Krishnamurti. I think if we have to start from there, you know, what perceptions of what Krishnamurti is. I think our you talked about so much of physical world, and you brought a lot of nice observations. So each of us, you know, in a way, we are different, sir. Like my propensity is more towards human understanding human behavior. Like maybe you are a scientist by your profession, so your interest is more towards those areas, and each of us are different. So my strong point or whatever you say, or my basic fact from where I understand things, is from these areas, which are my areas of interest. So for me, the perception of what I find in Krishnamurti books, there are a whole lot of things. Like as Harsh Tanka is saying, people are saying, it deals with love, it deals with the goodness, it deals with morality, what is not morality. It deals with whole lot of things. So what we perceive, how we perceive, on what we take from it, I think it also it's a different. He does speak about collective human consciousness, but he does speak about human behavior also. Each person, he says, observe it in your daily life. So he's saying each one of you also need to do this work. It's not about general statements about whole humanity. Whole humanity cannot change. Human beings, of course, we have to understand the universal laws and human consciousness. The how the the laws and the layers of human consciousness. We all come to this world with different levels of intelligence, different levels of perception, and each has got their own way of pursuing things based on their interests. So there is nothing called, a common platform or something like that. And I think, the whole world cannot change. I think, I don't know why that kind of a line is taken at all. Then you have to understand how universe works. Does universe bother about humanity? Yeah, and universal laws are the fundamental aspect of the teaching also. So understanding human consciousness, understanding human universal laws will give us some basic sense of what the teaching is about. So I'm just speaking about myself. I just don't want to, point. It's not to, you can say it's not discounting anybody's. I like. I think we need to appreciate each of our point of views, our perceptions, our the books we read, and all of these things we need to appreciate each other, and we can take points from each other. They also can be as a wonderful pointers also. So for me, Krishnamurti is all about that. And ultimately, it is one person's, inner. And I also feel that Krishnamurti is not stating any new religion. He only, and his basic focus was more on thought. Thought as I, me, myself. How it corrupts. How it always wants, just doesn't cannot move from its selfish and self-centered circles. How it always lives in patterns only. All these things also is stated at length. All the books are there. So more and more focus, according to me, Krishnamurti spoke more about thought. And he says when thought understands itself, I, me, myself understands, in the areas of this spiritual world, in the areas of the silent perceptions, it doesn't have any role. Then it comes to, it takes its own place. It comes to a standstill. And he says inquiry has to set in from there. And he also says transcending of human, he's not stating of transcending of human collective consciousness, transcending of human consciousness that can happen with one person, and then that person may start affecting that, like like how he affected all our human consciousness. So one person, like how he also says, if you have to go to the immeasurable, you have to come naked to it. Stripped of each thought, is not exactly thought, seeing the entire structure of thought. Thought, how it comes and doesn't make us move anywhere, in the form of escapes, in the form of image making. He says all that is also part of the teaching. So he says all that also needs to take its place. Then man maybe may start traveling towards in another direction. He speaks so much of love, intelligence, wisdom is all part of it. So I think observation of physical world is important. Observation of all these inner aspects are also is important. Maybe it's about one's propensity towards how far one wants to go into it. So I think we all come to read Krishnamurti at different maybe mental caliber, mental stamina. It's not about, it's not stating about collective things. There are, he says about collective consciousness, but at the same time there is also about individual consciousness. And only when you are out of it, then maybe you merge with universal consciousness, which is very part of it, sir. I think for the time being, only these points are coming to my mind.
Thank,
And I just would like to say, sir,
thank,
yes, sir, just a
thank you.
moment. I would like to say, in fact, for the past few days, I've been reading a wonderful book by Rabindranath Tagore. The name of the book is Sadhana, The Realization of Life. It's a beautiful book. And at so many places I felt it is, am I reading Krishnamurti or something like that? And the ultimate end, I think all the great minds, great seers, they look at things in the same way. And he has given so many more pointers, like when we read Krishnamurti, we are lost. We don't know where, what to figure out. He makes you to do the work. He makes you to figure out things. He doesn't give any answers. But when I read Rabindranath Tagore's book, sir, he wrote in such a illustrated way, and he brought out so much of wisdom, so much of all these beautiful things which we grapple our minds with. I really strongly suggest that book lovers and Krishnamurti readers to read that book, sir. Thank you so much. That's all I have
Thank
to
you.
say.
Thank you. May I request Harshad Parikh, sir?
Okay. 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 The root meaning of the word intelligence is to read between the lines. And that means when we are reading something, what is the essence behind the words? So when we are able to capture the essence of some writing, or even the essence of, while we are looking at a tree, that life which is there, to sense that, that is what I consider to be the intelligence, means to sense something which is not expressed in words or in sound. So that is what intelligence is. And other thing is about the animal dying, which Gopalanji said, that the animals die very peacefully. Yes, that is true. Human beings don't die peacefully because we have the ability to think, we have language, we have the sense of I or me, and it doesn't want to die, which creates many conflicts. So in a way, this thinking which we have human beings, in a way, in one way, if it is used properly, it is a blessing. And if it is not used properly with intelligence, then it can become a curse. So both ways are possible for human beings. And this intelligence or insight is very, very important to have. Otherwise, life becomes very mechanical, and many, many problems arise in relationship like anger or fear, jealousy. It is only because we do not have this intelligence which can look at what is behind it. So when we get angry, generally we try to justify it or find fault with somebody else, but don't ask question like, what is anger? What is behind it? So that kind of looking inward is a sign of intelligence, which can see very, very clearly from where our all the problems are arising, even the fear of death. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Sasidhar, please unmute and say. Sasidhar. Sasidhar, you are requested to unmute and say.
Yeah, can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, we are hearing.
Yeah. So this has been a very interesting topic, so which got into my notice. So the word, the caption was intelligence, the daughter of wisdom. So if we have to understand that, and what we have been hearing from all the participants, my view is, if we have to explain it practically, today we have the artificial intelligence and robots. Robots have kind of literally taking the human space. So the difference between a robot working and a human working. So what happens, the artificial intelligence has evolved so much with the big data, so which is precisely kind of trying to understand and intelligize the whole information which is there. And the human capability is the wisdom. The difference is the robots may not have the wisdom, but the human beings have the wisdom. So the wisdom is basically the emotions, the love, the empathy, and the moral. These are the parameters which add to the intelligence what the machine has got. And these parameters which are missing in the robots are what the humans have the superiority over. So, but to understand what the caption is talking about is the wisdom, the intelligence is the daughter of wisdom. Basically, it means that even though the intelligence comes first, the data comes first, and through that we analyze and then put human emotions to that and take a decision. So then in that case, what comes first is the intelligence. And then we, through our emotions, we take a decision, even though there may be something against what the data is giving us. So, but what we have to understand as per the caption, then what happens is what comes first is the intelligence and then the wisdom. The caption should say that, so intelligence, the wisdom is the daughter of intelligence, but it says other way around. So what is the catch in this is, there is another adage where we generally hear, child is the father of the man. So which means the child is the father. How can a child be the father of the man? But what is the understanding is, whatever has been absorbed in the childhood, the human being will evolve himself to be a man, whatever he has absorbed in the childhood. So the child comes first, and the father, and he grows to be a man. So the child is the father of the man. That is what is the understanding. Similarly, in this, even though the intelligence is the first, and then we add emotions to that, and then take a decision. So it has to be understood that human beings are first made of emotions, love, and empathy and morals. So because of that, the entire intelligence is running through this layer, and then the data is perceived and decisions are taken. So with this, so this entire caption is very appropriate. What Krishnamurti ji has mentioned, that intelligence is the wisdom of the, sorry, intelligence is the daughter of wisdom. Thank you.
Gopalan sir, would you please say something more?
Oh, I think I've said enough. See, as I said, each one of us, or rather every one of us, has to unpack this for ourselves, right?
Yes.
There is no one single explanation here for this. But I take this point of what Shashidhar said, of the child being the father of the man. And that was what, in a sense, I was trying to talk about through the simile of the balloon. When you blow the balloon and that pattern gets revealed in greater and greater detail, that pattern existed right in the beginning. So truth is all encompassing, and it can manifest itself as wisdom, as intelligence, because truth can't observe itself. It is only through its actions that you observe truth. This is my understanding.
Thank you. Sakti sir, please unmute and say.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I just wish to share my this, what I have understood by this. It may be, something strange also, but it seems that in this excerpt, the wisdom as I receive it is the capacity to reason, logic, and to see things also. And then there may be or there may not be insight. It may be just an impulse, but that that faculty of our brain, if it is there, which includes complete honesty with oneself, might mean wisdom. And in this, if insight happens, and we usually throw away those insights. We understand something and there is no application, we don't apply it. So maybe that leaving the insight, not scattering them, maybe that is intelligence. So this is what I understood. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Harsh Tanka, sir, please say. Harsh Tanka.
Listening to everybody, it sort of becomes clear that wisdom is something that we don't see very clearly, or at least we have different perceptions of what wisdom is. And that some people, I think Mr. Shashidhar was saying that from our emotions, we make a judgment. Well, and that we take the data and the knowledge, and then we add emotions, and then the emotions give us the capacity to act. Well, he may be right in that that's what we often do, that we act according to our feelings, according to our emotions, and that they dictate the action. But whether that is always wise is another question. I would not say, I think many people feel that somehow feelings are a truer guide to what, rather than thought. Thought is very cold and analytical, and it looks at things and weighs and measures and balances. That's not a good point to be making decisions for. You have to be looking at things with feeling and passion. And these feelings are the ones that will help you to make the right decision. Because behind this question is really, for us, the question of how we act in our life. How do we have the right action in our lives? You know, this is not intellectual. It's an ongoing concern we have. How do we have the right action in our life? And we kind of have a sense that this right action comes from intelligence and wisdom. And but as is often the case, Krishnamurti is talking about wisdom that is clearly beyond thought, is beyond emotions and feelings as well. They may be a guide to what we do, but they can just go wrong just as easily as thought can go wrong, and they can be limited, they can be partial. So it is beyond, wisdom is beyond emotion. If you would like, I would like to read to you an excerpt about wisdom.
So please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay. First thing that Krishnamurti says, this is excerpt from 1950, fifth public talk in Bombay. So it starts by saying the understanding of the self is the beginning of wisdom. And wisdom is not reaction. Yeah. And somewhere along, he says, the questioner wants to know how wisdom is come by and how to cultivate it. You cannot cultivate wisdom. You can cultivate knowledge, information, but you cannot cultivate wisdom, because wisdom is not a thing that can be accumulated. The moment you begin to accumulate, it becomes mere information, knowledge which is not wisdom. The entity that cultivates wisdom is still part of thought, and thought is merely a response, a reaction to challenge. So, and relevant to some of the other things that we're saying, he says, if you have no store of experience and memory, from where do you get your wisdom? If you're not depending on your knowledge, then where do you get your wisdom? How do you manage to cultivate it? So then he challenges the audience and says, first of all, how do you know that what I am saying is wisdom? Then everybody laughs. Sirs, do not laugh. By what measurement, what yardstick do you measure it? Is there a measurement for wisdom? Can you say this is wisdom and this is not? Is sensation wisdom? Or is the response to sensation wisdom? Sirs, you do not know what wisdom is. Therefore, you cannot say, I'm speaking wisdom. Wisdom is not which you experience, nor is it to be found in a book. Wisdom is not something that you can experience at all, that you can gather, accumulate. On the contrary, wisdom is a state of being in which there is no accumulation of any kind. You cannot gather wisdom. So this is Krishnamurti on wisdom.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So Deshna Sinha, would you please unmute and say? So Deshna Sinha.
Hello. Yes, I'm just trying to explore, like Kay has said that thought comes from memory, and that I understand that, because when experience is incomplete, then it is recording. But I'm just exploring, I'm asking, is there any thought which will not be recorded in the memory? Like I have had a perception and I want to express it. So I will, there will be thought, there will be words. So is all thought coming from memory? I'm just trying to explore it. I don't know what others have to say. Yes.
Thank you very much. Gopalan sir, would you please comment on this?
Can we first ask, is perception within the field of thought, or perception is independent of thought?
If I can respond to you.
Yeah. Please. Please speak
You could
within
say,
2 minutes, sir.
okay, you could say that there is a perception that is based on thought. Often it is a perception of thought. When I perceive, say when I recognize somebody, I look and I recognize somebody. I might call that perception, that I have perceived something, I've observed something, but thought has participated in that. Otherwise, how did I recognize you? So a key to that is in the word recognition. When we see something for the first time that we have never seen before, that is generally called cognition. And when we see something that we have seen before, then it's recognition, recognition, cognition again. So I think we're talking about cognition. There is a perception for the first time. At that point, no thought is involved. But there may be a perception which repeat, in which case thought is involved.
I wonder whether we try to explain things linearly, but what I'm trying to point out is perception happens in the brain. Without a brain, there cannot be perception. But just because there is perception in the brain doesn't mean thought has to rise. That has become our habit. So deep down, actually, in our conversation, what we are really saying is, I perceive. I is thought only. So thought perceives. This is how we assume. Very rarely do we really question, is there a difference between perception happening in the brain and the thought rising? Are they both side by side happening, or perception can happen and thought doesn't have to rise?
Thank you, sir. Time is over. I have to announce the next Sunday lecture by Roshan Dalal. So you have to attend, all of you have to attend. Thank you very much for everyone. And somehow Rabindranath Tagore entered in this event. I say, as long as he is sending child to the humanity, they are ambassador and we need not to worry about it. So be assured that they are coming and they are ambassador, they will humanity. I believe that. And with this belief, I end it. Please finish it. Please end it. Kamleshji, please end it.